What's up, y'all? This is Mansur coming at you with a brand new video, and today we're going to be doing some keying. So let's get into it. We got Premiere Pro open. Here are the clips, and we're going to start with this one. This one is going to just need a basic key. Now I just dragged it into a new composition or a new sequence because this is Premiere Pro, not After Effects. This right here has a really clean green screen. I'm going to clip off the rest of the footage here so we can just work with this. I'm going to clip off the front as well. I press Q and let's get started. Now I'm going to type in, or we already have it here, Ultra key. Now it's in the keying menu set. Ultra key, let's open it up. I'm going to key out the background. Now with a really good green screen, you'll get some really good results, on the first try. I pressed H for the hand tool. And as you can see, the key is pretty solid. Now, let's bring up a clip that needs a little bit more work. Okay, we got this one right here. Just give me a second. Okay, now let's open this up. As you can see behind him, there's like a gradient background. And of course, this was recorded this way. But you can still work with this, but it just needs a little bit more work, and you need tweaking with the key light effect itself. So let's open it up. Now, since this is a gradient, we're going to select something somewhere in the middle. So we're going to pick this shade of green right here. Now let's open up the matte generation menu set, okay? And this right here is basically a color correction, but within the effect itself. So if you bring down the transparency and bring it up to something reasonable, maybe 20%, then bring up the pedestal so that it can focus on the subject and not the background. Bring down the highlights because, as you can see, this area right here holds most of the highlights. So bring down the highlights. You can bring it all the way down to 0 if you wanted to. And as you can see, the key is mostly done. Now let's open the alpha channel. As you can see, this right here is still visible. So let's go back to the composite view and let's mess with the shadows. If I turn this off, you would see that this area right here make up the shadows. So if you turn down the shadows, let's go into the alpha channel. If you turn down the shadow, it would take out all the dark areas. Now, you don't want to mess with this too much because when you look at your subject, because he's the point, if you bring down the shadows too low, it kind of clips on the edges. So you should bring it down to maybe even 50% is good. And as you can see, we got something that's, okay. Let's try to remove this. We can try bringing up the pedestal to 50%. Maybe even select the eyedropper and select something a little bit darker, maybe down here. You see? And now we have something that is okay. But when he moves his hand, we get something that's really, unappealing. But it doesn't really matter because in the original footage, he's blurred out, almost entirely. So it's fine here. Let's bring up the tolerance to 80% because you don't want the green screen spilling on him. Now, let's go down into the screen matte. You should soften it just a little bit. Maybe bring it up to 5%. I never really use the choke because I don't need to. Now, if we zoom in closer, you would see that it cuts away at the subject. So let me bring this down to 0. And I'll bring this up to 100% so you can really see what I'm talking about. It cuts the edges down, a little too much. So I wouldn't use the choke, but if you need to, you can. It's the options there. Now, let's mess with the transparency. Now let's bring up the transparency maybe to 15%. And now let's scrub through the footage to make sure we got something we want. Okay, now this key seems to be really good. Now, but we still need to deal with these dark areas over here. So in order to do that, we would have to, we can duplicate the effect. Control C, because this isn't After Effects, so you can't just press Control D. It's Control C, then Control V. Now this works across all software. You know, Control C is copy, Control V is paste. Now over here, we would create a mask. Now we would like to make this mask, you know, as small as possible, because you don't want the, you don't want this to be affecting the main footage as much as you need it to, because eventually he's going to reach his arms into this area. But, you know, let's focus on just removing this area. Now let's turn off the previous key and let's focus on this one. So select the darkest area. We got something here, and you know, it did a pretty good job of removing everything. Let's bring down the pedestal to maybe 30%, so that when the subject does, you know, move into this area, it wouldn't clip that much. And, you know, you would hardly notice anything different about the subject when he crosses over into this area right here. And you want him to be able to. So in order for me to demonstrate this to you, I can maybe drag the mask over to where he is. And as you can see, you know, we have something that's acceptable. It's not the best, but it's still really good. Now let's Control Z and turn the other effect on. Now, so as you can see, nothing really happened when I turn this back on. And that's because this key right here, you know, the main key is on top of the previous key. So what this is, you know, this is keying out the color green, but there's no color green to be found because this effect right here is not seeing the raw footage. It's seeing what happened after I used this key right here. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to drag the older key on top of the newer one. And as you can see, we got something that we want. Now this is a really good key right here. Now in order for me to, you know, really demonstrate this to you outside of an alpha channel, because an alpha channel would do the trick. Now you can see that there's some areas here that still need to be keyed out, but I think this is due to the mask not being large enough. Okay, and maybe we can do some, maybe we can bring up the pedestal here, maybe to 40. And let's bring up the shadow to 100. Maybe, but we don't really need to key this, you know, this isn't really that important. Now let's go back to the composite. And in order for you to really see this key in action, we would put a background behind him. So let's get something, let's get a gradient PNG. I have one right here in the bin. Now, as we scrub through this, as you can see, we have a pretty strong key. Now, let me full screen this so you can see what I'm talking about. Now you can really go in and really tweak this to get something you really want. But for right now, this will do. And you see this area right here. We don't really need to key it, but we can just mask it off because, you know, our subject isn't going to be moving over here anyway. So let's get out of this. Let's go to the main effect. And we can just use a basic mask. And we're going to mask under the opacity because we're going to mask from the footage itself. We're not going to mask anything from the key. So there we go. Now invert this. And the reason why we need to invert this is because this is what's visible. And right now the rest of the footage itself is invisible. So there we go. Now we don't have any issues with the corners because we got rid of those. And there, we have something pretty strong. Now, I don't really like the colors here. You know, they seem a little unnatural. So maybe I can go back into the key. No, this is the older one. This is the new one. And maybe bring down the tolerance, maybe to 60%. But then you get a lot of green here. We can jump into some color correction. and really get this done, but I can show you how to do this in another video because this is a process on its own. Maybe you can bring this up. Maybe bring up the exposure. Maybe turn this down, maybe 0.3. Anyway, let's get back to the editing menu set and see we got something. Now, since we did some color correction, this Lumetri color option has been added, and that's because it's the color correction itself. So once you turn this off, you see there's a huge difference made here, and that's just messing with the color. Now you can do this after you've keyed everything out. Hope this helped. That's it. Hope you guys found value in that tutorial, and I'll be back with some more. Bye.